Hello and welcome to another episode of The Film Angle. I'm Alex,
And I'm Chris.
and today we are going to cover a couple more of our blind spots in the BFI Greatest Films of All Time list. We are going to talk a little bit about a couple of recent watches that we've seen, but to get things started, I just want to say, we didn't mention it on the last episode, but it's now been officially a year since we started The Film Angle. So we've been doing this for a year now, Chris. How do you feel?
It's crazy. It kind of just snuck up on me. I remember you posting the reel that was showing a compilation of our kind of our best moments of the year or whatever. It kind of was like, what? It's been a year already. I mean, it feels like we haven't worked hard enough. Maybe that's why.
I'm happy. I think we've grown as a podcast. I think we sound much better now than we did at the start, and I think we're really finding our groove.
And I
And
hope that
I'm
continues as well.
of course I'm excited for this year to come, especially with our kind of little sight and sound series as well. So
Hmm.
yeah, big into that. But I just want to correct you there, Chris. Although you may have seen the reel on Instagram Reels, it was not originally a reel. It's a TikTok, guys, to mark the 1 year anniversary of the Film
I'm
Angle.
sorry.
We're joining Generation Z, and we're on TikTok, baby. So come follow us on TikTok, where we're going to make a fool of ourselves and do some dancing and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're a lot more like natural with that sort of thing than me. Um, I struggle to be a goofball, but I will try to throw myself into it.
Rude.
Well, you just naturally are a goofy guy. I mean, you look a little bit stranger than me. You walk weird, funny.
Yeah, that is true. Actually, I've got like a weird foot. They kind of go, yeah.
Oh yeah, I saw that. You need to get that looked at.
I should probably get that looked at. It's always in pain a lot at the moment as well. So I think it's my gym trainers potentially.
Too big, too small.
Maybe too small. Anyway, come follow us on TikTok. We've got all kinds of
Absolutely.
weird, crazy stuff that we're going to do, which we haven't thought of yet, but it's going to happen. And Cody is going to
Sounds like
be
a
in a lot of it.
threat.
Yeah. Cody, my golden retriever, he's going to be in it a lot because the algorithm loves dogs.
Hmm.
And he is a handsome one. So
Yeah,
come watch, even if it's just for him and his opinions on films.
yeah, definitely worth it alone. This episode today is probably going to be a bit more BFI sight and sound heavy.
Mm.
As we mentioned before, we've got one or two movies that we've caught up with, recent releases. Should we go into our first one? You hadn't seen this movie, but I managed to catch up on Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Um, the movie like nobody really asks for. I mean, I don't think Puss in Boots has really been relevant for 10 years, really, right?
Yeah, I kind of disregarded this one. I'm hearing lots of good things now, but yeah, I mean, I loved Shrek 1 and 2. I'm pretty sure I saw 3, and was there a 4? There was a Shrek 4, right?
There was Shrek Goes Fourth. I think that's what it
Something
was
like
called.
that.
Yes.
And then they span off Puss in Boots, and I just always saw it as a cash grab.
Mm,
And I just kind of like fell off that franchise. Um, and so had no kind of interest to go see this latest movie.
which I don't blame. I think I come from the similar point really because when the first Puss in Boots movie came out, again that was about like 10 years ago or something. It came out, it was okay. Instantly forgot about it. I can't tell you anything that happened in that movie. So whenever this was announced, and I didn't even watch the trailer for this, I think everybody was just like, okay, whatever. And then the reviews came out, and
Mm.
people on Letterboxd, people on Rotten Tomatoes were going off about how fun this movie was, like how much of a riot. So I had to catch up and just see what the hype was about. So managed to go see it on Friday, and the hype is real. It's this movie absolutely is crazy. So it's about Puss in Boots discovers that his passion for adventure is kind of taking its toll. He's burned through 8 of his 9 lives, so leaving him with only one left. He's quite reckless. We see him in montages of being very reckless, of throwing himself into things because he knows he'll keep being reincarnated again. So his life is kind of threw away. But then he is stalked by a wolf figure who actually turns out to be Death, and Death is stalking Puss in Boots. and running
Oh,
after him. And yeah, it's actually kind of weird and existential. It's like, and that Antonio Banderas really leans into that melancholy really well. But that's only a small part of the movie. The rest of it is just so much fun. It's laugh a minute sort of stuff, epic adventure that mixes the traditional and exciting ways with the new. Also just delivering a really earnest, heartfelt story, and it's a good old 90 minutes. You could take your littlest kid to see it. You could take your grandmother to see it. Everybody's gonna have a really good time with it. There's something for everybody. But the thing that really stood out for me was the art style. I saw this time it's almost like it's channeling a little bit of anime mixed with like Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse with its
I
action
was
scenes.
thinking Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse when I
Hmm.
saw a trailer for it. I did think, "Ooh, they've gone for that kind of more interesting animation style than your kind of generic 3D characters."
And almost like kind of like a Ghibli movie, whenever those action scenes are going, we get like a stuttered frame rate. So
Oh,
that it really makes the action feel a lot more like kinetic and grandiose. And there's this opening scene where Puss is fighting this giant like moss rock monster. And it is like one of those anime TV shows where it's like a third person view of Puss, while from his perspective, thrusting towards the battle, and it's just really really cool. I mean, it's so well animated and directed, way better than it has any right to be. It's like a real surprise. They could really have made that lazy and phoned in, and people would have still seen it. But there's just like real love and effort and care put into this, and it's great.
that's interesting. That's interesting. I, your review, what I've heard from reviews from across the pond, definitely sounds like it is actually an animated film that's got a little bit of effort put into it, and has got a lot of heart. So maybe one I'll have to catch up on soon, just to see what the hype's all about.
If anything, the best character in it is a little dog that pretends to be a cat so that he can fit in the cat shelter that Puss gets thrown into at the start of the movie when he's on the downpaw. No pun intended. This character is called Perito, who's like a little Chihuahua pug kind of thing. Who
Okay.
he's alone. He's like, think of all the Disney side characters, like princess sidekicks ever, but this one is the funniest you've ever seen. I mean, I'd watch this movie just for this guy alone. So yeah, definitely check it out. It's currently in cinemas, so yeah, catch up with it.
Nice. I've only saw one other film outside of the BFI ones that I saw. I watched The Apology, which is like a Shudder original. I was looking for something kind of thrillery slash horror. It's definitely more of a thriller on Sunday night. And yeah, this one kind of took my fancy because it had Anna Gunn from Breaking Bad in it, and the plot
Mm-hmm.
is 20 years after the disappearance of her daughter, recovering alcoholic, is preparing to host her Christmas celebration with her family, and then her estranged ex brother in law arrives unannounced, bearing nostalgic gifts and a heavy secret. Two guesses as to what that secret is. You could probably figure it out from the tagline itself, but let's just say ex brother in law had something to do with the disappearance of her daughter. It's a really
Uh-huh.
interesting premise. A
Are those
really
nostalgic?
interesting premise. But man, it suffers by just being quite dull. Potentially a COVID film. It's the whole film's pretty much two people in a house for the most of it, having a conversation. Dialogue's quite interesting. There's no doubt it's a relatively well written script. Um, but I must say Anna Gunn is kind of stands tall against the rest of the cast, um, who don't really kind of reach the heights.
Right.
And
Okay.
when you've got two people kind of having that confrontation, and one of them is clearly not.
Oh, so it's not like a screenplay
It's
issue. It
it's
is the
the it's the
performances.
performance of the brother-in-law that kind of lost me a little bit. I just don't think he was as strong as Anna
Mm,
Gunn, and he doesn't sell it as well. Um, but and then the film
right.
itself, it's clearly low budget, but it just like the director wasn't really doing anything interesting with the camera, so there's nothing really visually pleasing to it. When again, two people in a house, you need to give me something to kind of keep me gripped, and unfortunately. that was a bit of a boring one. So, kind of a miss for me on anything outside of the BFI films at the moment.
Yeah, you really need a reason to exist as a horror movie, especially in this type of genre at the minute. When you've got competition that is, especially when things from A24 or Annapurna is coming out, consistently making really strong, inventive horror movies. And that's the point. You need to be inventive. Audiences aren't really craving the traditional or static at the minute. So, yeah, you really got to make it stand out. And it sounds like they kind of blew their budget on the principal character and maybe put the rest of the characters to
Potentially
the back
so,
the
potentially
backside.
so. I just think somebody needed to be on Anna Gunn's level in the performance uh, range.
Hmm.
So yeah, unfortunately, didn't do that for me. Didn't do anything for me. So
So another film that I caught up with was kind of a release a couple of months ago, but I still feel like it's a movie talked about quite a bit and worth discussing. Was She Said, starring Carey Mulligan and Zoe Kazan, which is based on the whole Harvey Weinstein Me Too movement, sort of that started in 2016 when obviously that the New York Times released a big article on the whole exploits of Harvey Weinstein and how women were mistreated under his care. This think about like a movie like Spotlight, but maybe not as good. I think this movie struggled with itself in terms of it was trying to be kind of like fictionalizing a documentary, kind of putting a documentary into film format, and then sometimes it just kind of forgot to be a movie. You know, there are moments where there is character development, but it's kind of just replaced by stuff we already know. We've read, we're so aware. It's part of our social concept right now where in Hollywood it's just kind of all around us and everybody knows the story. I think it gets some moments really, really right when some of the survivors are kind of, telling their stories and their perspectives, and some of those moments are very, very harrowing. But it's just kind of on the nose, which is kind of not what you want to be. I mean, the story is so fascinating by itself. You can just let that unfold by itself. But yeah, it kind of
yeah,
struggled for
I
me.
can see that because I liked Spotlight. It was fine. I didn't love it. So to hear that this is Spotlight esque but not good enough really turns me off. I think the Me
Mm.
Too movement, and obviously the article that sparked that is like we. It was such a big moment. I feel like we all read that article. Um, I don't know what the film's going to tell me that's different. I think the way the film world has tried to kind of react to the Me Too movement has been a bit all over the place so far. I don't think this is the film to do it. I think the film
Mm.
from
Hmm.
2 years ago, was it The Assistant? I think
Yes.
I think that was the most kind of nuanced film about the Me Too movement, that really kind of dug into power dynamics within a workplace. So I think it sounds like we're still waiting for the definitive film to kind of encapsulate that moment.
But here's the thing: the movie can't decide what it wants to be. It wants to be the movie that you show to your parents that aren't, or your grandparents, or something that aren't aware or socially aware of the details of this situation. So they're being kind of spoon fed information that we already know. But at the same time, there's an assumption that we already know the story and we're already on the side of it. So it's like, who is the audience here? You know, you're into detail, but you're also very vague. And you just know where it's kind of going. I think Carrie Mulligan is a standout for me here. She plays the reporter Megan Toohey. She's great. I mean, I've always been a big Carrie Mulligan fan, and when she just is such a striking image on screen. She is such a great character actor, and she leans into being a bit more slightly forceful journalist of the two. Zoe Kazan is a little bit more a softer approach, and that's why they kind of complement each other really, really well. But Carrie Mulligan, I mean, has she ever done a bad performance? I mean, any movie she's in, she makes
What
it
about
better,
the
right?
guy playing Harvey Weinstein? Is there much of Harvey Weinstein in this?
There is much, well, more mention than him being in it. He is in it physically for about a sequence, but it's more from
Okay.
like behind the headshots, um, and all the vocals that we hear from the Weinstein in this movie is through telephone conversations. Um, so it's done that way. So there's also Donald Trump is also being questioned in one scene of this movie where he's on the other end of the phone. Well, actually, he rings up the reporters and just rips into them and calls them disgusting and says, I would never do anything like that. All these allegations are false, and then puts that to bed, and then the next night he gets elected president. So it's showing that's what it's trying to be. It's trying to be like, right, we failed here, we failed on Trump. We couldn't stop him. Let's see if we can stop this guy and see if we can like show the world that a precedent can be broken and that we can, affect change, which they ultimately did. The whole movie struggle is about trying to convince the survivors. Every survivor that they go up to, they're too afraid to talk. They'll hang the phone up instantly, or they won't answer the door. It takes the first domino to fall for them all to kind of follow and jump into the river together. So that's kind of like the tension in this movie, is trying to find that bravery and go forward. But you know, I think it's such a recent and impactful story, and still something that's going on, that's very, it will be going on for some time. But the movie doesn't feel as impactful as the real life story. It feels small in itself. And yeah, it's absolutely fine. It's serviceable. I'm sure a lot of people will really enjoy it. You maybe don't know the details as much, and it might be an education for them. But for the clued in, I think they might find less to enjoy. Let's move on to the sight and sound list. What we've been catching up on. We've both seen
Yeah.
both of the movies we're going to talk about today. Um, Maybe I'm a little bit more enthusiastic about particularly one of these movies more than you, but I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yeah,
Um,
I wasn't super blown away by either of these films. Let's start with the next one on the list that was our blind spot, which is Yi Yi, directed by Edward Yang.
mhm.
It follows a Taiwanese family, a kind of middle class family, and they're kind of. Uh, again, it's one of those films. It's difficult to kind of put it down. So many different plot threads. The father is works for a video game company, but his ex lover comes back from the
Yeah,
past while his wife's brother's getting married. His grandmother or his mother in law has a stroke. The family has to deal with that. His daughter is kind of figuring out her place in the world. So is his son, who's getting into photography but getting into trouble at school. Um, there's a lot going on, but would I be unfair in
mhm.
saying that this was a bit of a soap opera, Chris?
Well, I think less soap opera, more family saga is probably a better term that I would use. What I thought was really interesting about this movie is the dynamics, or the passing ships nature of the family dynamics in particular. We're used to seeing movies where family dramas in particular, where everybody's decisions or everybody's lives are interconnected, and they kind of shift and focus on everybody. But what this movie does really well is actually showing how people are passing ships, and there are things going on in the kids' lives, things are going on in the parents' lives, that they're not in their each other's world. They are existing in the same spot, but they are, they're completely existing in different realities where they're unaware of the other situation, which I think is really, really true to life. And I thought that kind of, shone a light on something very interesting. It's like whenever you're watching one of these mini plots or stories being played out, you're almost forgetting about the other family members, just as those family members are forgetting about them. And I thought that was really interesting.
That is actually a really nice way of putting it. Actually, I didn't think of it that way. To me, it at the time felt like a slice of life film. You're plotted down into this kind of
Hmm.
family's current issues, their current affairs, and just kind of allowed to watch it play out for 3 hours. I didn't see it in the kind of different families going on. I did see it in a way of kind of like the modern day life of these characters kind of intersecting with the traditional Taiwanese family unit and how it's changing, and obviously that comes into play
Mm,
with the mother who's had a stroke, and how kind of she's not needed as much anymore. She's a great crux in the film for kind of these kind of personal monologues that come to play, as the rest of the family get to almost unload on her while she's in this coma about what's going on, and kind of talk about things that potentially they wouldn't have had she been awake. So, yeah, it's there's interesting stuff going on. I just feel like I've seen the kind of slice of life film done better, and more interesting. Like Coriader comes to mind, in terms of like his
hmm
kind of
hmm
ensemble pieces. Um, I liked it. I just wasn't fully on board with it.
Who's sort of did you have a plot line in the story that kind of you struggled to connect with, or one that maybe you connected with more? I mean, I do feel like there are stronger moments in this movie, and I do feel for me that kind of resonated with the father character in particular, with his relationship with the wife, who is very strong in the forefront of the movie, and then she just sort of disappears. Obviously, she leaves. She can't live in the family home because she's just too upset and exhausted by her mother being in a comatose state. So the father kind of has that space to explore that old flame that he had with that woman. Was it 20 something years ago? And he explores a path of what might have been. They go on a business trip together. There's a Japanese investor who is very taken by the father figure, and they're in conversations to maybe save their gaming company. So they go on an excursion, and the old flame he binds into, and it's a really fascinating, and it's not demonizing him at all. I actually think he's very likable and very earnest and honest about his relationship with his wife and with this woman, and he is more curious, not perhaps sexually, or he's not thinking about that. He is, what would have my life would have been, and he's interested to play that out over the next couple of weeks. And it's
Yeah,
quite sad to see that too. We see a guy who's had his hardships, stuck in the mundanity of life, and I kind of struck a chord with me. I think he just plays the role so well. It's hard not to be on his side.
absolutely. He's a very quiet and contemplative soul, and you're right. His story line, his story arc is the most interesting. I think that is down to the fact that it probably is the most cinematic, with this kind of lover from the past, almost
Mm,
like the before sunrise has happened to these guys, but it never worked out, and what could have been. That's really interesting.
contemplative walks down,
Yeah,
beautiful
I
locations, and
like that would have been a good film by itself, I think. I don't know if I needed everything else. The other character I kind of gravitated towards was Yang Yang, the young boy.
yeah,
I really kind of enjoyed his story, and he gets the kind of emotional crux at the end of the film where he gets to speak at the funeral of his, I guess it would be grandmother, wouldn't it?
yeah.
And kind of has this kind of really interesting speech where basically he was too shy at the time to talk to her while she was in her comatose state, but kind of builds up that courage at the end of the film, and kind of has a really kind of, I don't know, beautiful and interesting monologue. Makes me think that potentially he's a placement for the director himself. His kind of feelings on how he kind of goes about life. So um,
That's so true, isn't it? It's like I think almost Yang Yang is Edward Yang. I think it almost him embody himself as a child. He's, you know, s- I think cinema is a very important part of this movie, where obviously Yang Yang gets a camera, and we see at the towards the end of the movie that he's been taking, all these back headshots of all the family members, which is really really interesting because it's almost like him at his most humanist. He's demonstrating, through the mouthpiece of Yang Yang, he's always interested in looking through the eyes of others. And I think, and that's what it is. Your Yang Yang's experiencing the world by osmosis, and that's kind of like filmmaking. You pick up all these pieces in your life, and then you write about them, and it feels like something that is kind of personal and close to home, and not doesn't need to necessarily be showy, but I think it's beautiful nonetheless. And I think it would be, I think it's hard to watch this at home because you do have to be disciplined, but if you got to see this on the big screen, I think it'd be hard not to be kind of wrapped up and enamored by it. I think it'd be a different experience.
I think you're absolutely correct on that one. Really struggled to find the time to fit Yi in, and had to watch it in more than one sitting, which I hate doing. But I had to deal with this one. But
it's the thing with
again,
long movies, isn't it? You're like, when you finally get around to seeing them, you're like, right, okay, I have to watch this. And then that is always like a bad attitude to go into at the beginning. I'm guilty for it all the time. And you just almost have to like forget the length and just, right, I'm watching a movie and it is
yeah.
what it is. And that's the hardest thing.
Though we did discover just today that one of the films coming up in the series that's one of our blind spots is 7 hours long.
Yeah, maybe my theory doesn't quite work there.
I've got a feeling that might be one done in segments as well.
Yeah, that's at least a 3-parter.
Yeah,
At least.
yeah. I'm pretty sure Histoire du Cinéma, the Jean-Luc Godard series we were talking
Which is a
about.
TV show, basically.
Yeah, like that is episodic in its format anyway.
And that
So.
actually has episodes. It's not a movie.
Exactly. But there
That
you go.
Alex, you blew 50 English pounds on.
Almost, but it'll be worth it, Chris. It'll
Oh,
be
right.
worth it.
Okay. 49.99. Yeah, gotcha.
45.99. Okay.
But anyway, I really recommend Yi anyway. It's a movie that's been on my watch list for some time. I've always known Edward Yang is such an inspirational filmmaker to a lot of people. I think he only died 7 years after making this movie. So he is a great talent lost too early. But we managed to get great cinema of him anyway. And I will definitely be pursuing more of his works. I'll have to, because there is one of his other movies which is further up on this BFI list. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm very excited to explore that too.
Definitely, even though I wasn't as hot on this one, still a very interesting film. Looking forward to seeing Edward Yang's other stuff. Yeah, this was actually his last film before he unfortunately passed away. So,
Oh man. How did I come back from that?
2 films on the top 100.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good going.
Pretty impressive. And there's a few directors though. I mean, they're truly great directors. Don't generally just have the one great movie, do they? It's you got your Hitchcocks on this list, you got your Kubricks, you got the guys you've earned one or two. Even Miyazaki gets 2 movies on this list. So yeah, there's some greats on here. So the other movie that I alluded to earlier on, which I'm really, really enthusiastic about, struggling to know how I'm going to articulate that enthusiasm. I just know I really liked it. It was the 1953 Ugetsu, which is a film by Kenji Mizoguchi, which is sort of like a parable, feudal Japan era fairy tale, sort of cautionary tale, would you
Yeah.
say?
Yes, yeah, it's almost a fable, isn't it? In terms
Mm-hmm.
of the kind of destruction of man, the the pursuit of greed, and.
Ignoring your loved ones.
Absolutely, absolutely. I liked this one quite a bit as well, but I was not 5 starring it on Letterboxd like you, Chris. Please explain to me why you gave
Oh, I
this
mean, come on.
the
You're
the
already putting a
ultimate
lot of
rating.
pressure. Can we just talk about the movie?
I need you to convince me, buddy.
Well, I'm a I've said before in the show, I am a sucker for this era. I'm a sucker for Japan, and I'm a sucker for a good parable. Akira Kurosawa films do this really, really well in his samurai movies. This is just more focused on the peasantry everyday life, which is something, again, you're seeing a bit of history mapped out to you. That's something that you don't see every single day. I think this is taken out of a famous Japanese book of fables, and that had many stories in it. And this is just two of the stories laced within. So it's set in 16th century Japan. It focuses on peasants Genjuro and Tobai who sell their like pots. It's kind of like crockery and pots and earthenware sort of stuff to a group of soldiers nearby in the village. They're really excited about it. It's a big sort of like business deal for them, and they can't wait to tell their wives. And a local sage warns them against kind of pursuing this greed any further. He's like, "You've made your money now. Just don't. If you pursue this anymore, it could lead to greed and your ultimate downfall." So what do? They kind of go completely against that, and they want a taste of this a bit more, and they want to impress their wives. They want to give them all the big fancy, showy stuff. Um, One of these guys kind of is infatuated with the idea of being a samurai. Um,
Yes.
Not really sure why. It's more like pure, like aesthetically why more than anything. The
Yeah,
vanity
he's
of
like
being a
desperate for
samurai.
the armor, isn't he? Like
Yes.
as soon as he gets some money, he's off to buy the armor of a samurai.
Yeah. It's Tobai, who has this desire to become a samurai, but to the detriment of his wife. We see him go down a path where he must, go do some pretty horrendous things, or kind of be like almost like a Smeagol Gollum character in this, where he scrounges around to try and find this armor, not through merit, but just through sheer connivingness. And meanwhile, his wife is being neglected in the background. She eventually succumbs to abandonment and prostitution because she's completely
Mm.
forgotten. It's like he comes back at the end of this movie with the armor. Look, aren't I great? I've got everything. Didn't you love me now? And she's already been down the wormhole and succumbed to everything due to his neglect. And they both have to live with that for the rest of the movie. But that's just one side of the story.
They both characters almost achieve kind of what they wanted, but at what cost
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
ultimately the kind of lesson of the film. Yeah, please describe more of our second character who goes down a bit more of a trippy route.
Yes, and this is the stuff in the movie I kind of loved the most. Genjiro, he is still pursuing. He's the one who's making these pots and these crockery ware, and he manages to kind of find this local village where he can escape the soldiers, leave his wife and child to kind of fend for themselves while he goes away and makes money. And he is selling his wares on the street, making loads of money, when suddenly he's approached by this mysterious lady, Wakaza, who, with her like sort of handmaiden, are coming into town, and they're like, right, okay, we love your stuff. I'll have 50 of your finest wares, deliver them to our manor. And he follows them down there. And then he gets kind of caught in this trap where he is seduced by the lady Wakaza, and kind of puts himself in a position where he is forced to marry her and never leave the manor. Um, and he gets completely drunk on this love, the seduction of this beautiful woman, and again, just like Tobai with the samurai, where he forgets his wife completely and his child, and they are succumbing to the soldiers and the feudal war going on in the background, and they become victims. And before he kind of comes to his senses at the end, which is kind of creepy. It's kind of like a horror movie at the same time.
Absolutely, yeah. This is where kind of Ugetsu gets its ghost story kind of
Hmm.
recognition, with some kind of really interesting sequences that play around with time a lot. His ending is very similar as well, where he goes back to his wife after escaping this mansion.
It's gut
Um,
wrenching.
and we as an audience already know that she has succumbed to her death. But he kind of carries on, not realizing that he is still being played with, he's still being fooled, and at the end, he is left with nothing. Um, And there you
It's
go.
so
That is
like
the cost of greed.
it's so cruel as well to him. It's not like it's an instant "oh, I'm home" thing and the house is empty. It's like he gets to actually spend a whole entire evening, a lovely evening, with his wife and child again. She cooks him dinner. Everything's fine. Don't worry. I know everything you've been through has been horrible, and I know you've made mistakes, but we're a family again, and we're sitting down here, and that's all that matters. And it's quite sweet. And I would have quite liked if the movie even ended like that, but instead, he goes to sleep. He wakes up in the morning, and the house is derelict. There's no furnishings, and his wife isn't there. And his son arrives to the door and said, oh, he somehow magically knows that his dad was in the house. And then two other villagers follow in and say, Genjiro, where have you been? He's like, we haven't seen you in months. And he's like calling out for his wife. And they're like, well, she's been dead. She's been dead. I thought you knew. So it's this really in a way we know it's coming, but like it still is effective at the same time. He's still like him are holding out for it to be a
Yes.
happy ending.
Plus, there is a part of you, and I don't know whether this is just because the film's old or the translation or anything like that. But there's a part of you that's like, is this real? Did she get better? She'll get like. There was definitely an
Mm.
element of like, am I being played with here? I don't know. Um, yeah, no, it's a really interesting film. It didn't grab me as much as I would have liked it to. I enjoyed
Mm.
it more than Yi Yi. I really enjoyed the kind of the message and the fact that it was a fable. The cinematography really really good. Like the attention to
Oh,
detail
that
and
scene on the river with the boat and the ghostly like mist going across.
that one in particular is one that sticks in my mind. That is a really really beautiful shot,
Hmm.
but spooky
And
as well. Very eerie,
oh
which
yeah,
is
and
playing on what's to come.
which is also, and it's also part of the whole parable fable thing. You got to get that sort of like surrealism down that this movie gets, and it really does that really well. What I will say that makes it the 5 star for me, and I hope to convince you of this, is I did a little bit. I was taken by it anyway, and then I did some research on Kenji Mizoguchi because I wanted to see what other films he'd done. And this movie is quite personal to him, actually. You think in 1953, this is post World War II, and Japan is kind of like reckoning with the Second World War and its involvement with the Nazi Party. And Kenji made a lot of movies during the Second World War and before it, which were always kind of they were pro-war movies. They were always about like being heroes and going thrusting towards the battlefield. And this movie is, from an interview that I read with him, is almost like taking a step back and recognizing the hatred and the willingness to go forward and fight. And this is a movie that's kind of reckoning with mistakes, and it's reckoning with this movie has been haunted the whole time with this war going on in the background, and in the meantime there's just a couple of people just trying to exist and trying to profit and prosper and be a family unit during this time. And it's a recognition that mistakes were made, and we need to move forward. And I thought that was kind of a really beautiful way, and when I watch the movie again now, I can see that.
That's interesting as well that you say that his previous films were about war and the heroes of war. In here, the samurais are very much not heroes.
Hmm.
They are pillagers and rapists. And even though they are there, we are looking at them from the point of view of peasants, essentially,
Hmm.
of the villagers. Um, so it's a really interesting kind of a lot of old Japanese cinema is very samurai heavy. So
Hmm.
to see this is kind of an interesting take.
Absolutely. I know we say it all the time, but the best thing about the movie, again, it's like 90 minutes long. We'd,
Yeah,
which we were really grateful for at the minute. But no, I was really sucked up in this. I would watch this again. I think this is my favorite movie that I have seen on the BFI list so far. I'm gonna put it out there.
I'm glad to hear it. For me, Once Upon a Time in the West still stands strong, but obviously that wasn't a blind spot for you, so you can't
Hmm.
put one of your
I
favorite
can't count that.
films
I can't count
in that
that.
area. What has been my favorite so far? I think if it wasn't Once Upon a Time in the West, out of the ones that you and I have watched together, probably Black Girl. I was really a big fan of Black Girl.
Yeah, that's a one-off, isn't it? It's like that is an experience I haven't seen before.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. But yeah, I mean, obviously, the next film coming up in the series is The Leopard, another long one, 3 hours of
I've been trying to
Italian
find time for this
drama.
one for a long
That
time.
being said, if a film is good enough and warrants the length, then I don't mind watching a long film.
Well, apparently we're in good company here because it's sitting at 100 Metacritic score. So
Well, that's the thing. The
that's pretty
likelihood
high
of these
praise.
films being good is pretty strong when some of the kind of best critics in the world are kind of hailing these films as some of the best. So
Hmm.
there's a good chance, and that's why I like this list. Is like there's a good chance we're going to like the film. So I'm going in ready to enjoy this one, and I think I'm going to do it in Awana because I actually have time to watch it this week.
Oh, you've got no obligations this weekend. Lucky you. This one also has Claudia Cardinale in it as well. So from Once Upon a Time in the West. So suddenly you've gone from no Claudia movies to two in like a month. So that's
There you
quite
go. I
funny.
didn't know that. There you go. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to it.
Well, it's been really nice talking about some BFI choices again here. I think next week we probably got one or two to talk about. Possibly. It depends on how prolific we are in the weekend. We have got a 3 hour movie to watch after all, but we'll definitely be talking The Leopard next week, which we're really, really excited about. Yeah. So we will get down to number one on this list eventually. And the year might be 2026, and we might be down to one listener. He's completely like fed up and given up with us by then. But no, we're really enjoying it nonetheless, as you can hear in our voices. But that's it for now, guys. I think
No,
Alex, unless you
no.
have something else to add,
Just that we're gonna get it done this year. I've got a feeling, Chris. We're gonna get it done within the.
we're
We're
gonna
gonna
get it
get it
done.
done
That's
within
the
the
tone
year.
of the year in general.
Um, we're gonna do it. We're gonna we're gonna try anyway. But yeah, no. Looking forward to discussing the leopard with you next week.
That's it.
And I know we both have plans to see the whale, so looking forward to discussing that film with you as well. Now that it's
Yes, I
finally
forgot
out
about that.
over here.
Well, that's it for now, guys. Please make sure to follow us on our Instagram and also, as Alex alluded to earlier on, our new TikTok page at the Film Angle. So we'll be trying to embarrass ourselves as
Hello, fellow
much as
kids.
possible on there, and I'm sure you probably will. Hello, kids. Here's my dog. To completely make up for the fact that I don't know what to say. I
Watch me
can't
do dance.
yeah, that's last case. That's like last resort. Is that we resort to dancing? No, yeah, that's when we're really, really desperate. But yeah, follow us on TikTok, on Instagram, and listen to us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from. But for now, it has been the Film Angle, and I'm Chris.
And I'm Alex.
See you later, guys.
Goodbye.